We've been talking about trauma and violence, but we're going to talk now about the anecdote.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I wrote that up there. I figured you guys would like it. I hope so.
Yeah, that's great.
This is our last session. I thought we better go up. Yeah. Enough about this terrible stuff. So who's our mic person?
Here's the mic. Who's
Yeah.
our mic person?
I can do it.
Oh,
Okay. Oh, thanks, Jen.
thank you.
Yeah. High energy Jen, she'll be there in a flash. Yeah. So before we start, does anyone have thoughts from our previous sessions or things you'd like to ask or share? Because we covered a lot of ground.
We actually had something at the end that came up. that we
Yeah,
said
it was
we
the
could-
women's, yeah.
Yeah.
There's some different people here. Would you like to reintroduce your topic briefly? So Jen, can we put the mic over here with, yes.
Are you not going to tell your
Good morning. My name is Srijana, and I'm originally from Nepal, but living in Charlottesville for the past 1 year because I'm in love with Charlottesville.
That's great.
Yesterday, while we were ending on the topic of trauma and violence, a question just came up in my mind. And I first thanked the panel for endorsing my belief that if you think positive, if you're hopeful, and you want to do things a certain way, and you throw it out to the universe, it happens. At the same time, back in my country, I had been part of conferences, sometimes as part of the event organizing team, and sometimes as a participant on the topic of empowering women. And most of the times when we talk about empowering women, we bring about data, and it's very dismal. The facts that women are violated, they are uneducated, they are discriminated in every way. For example, in Nepal, as a woman, I still cannot grant the right to citizenship to my children if I marry a foreign national. Yeah, it's true. I'm a nobody if I decide to marry a foreigner. So there are lots of discussions going on, and there are lots of things that needs to be solved. And the principles, as I learned here for the first time, which I had unconsciously adapted to a certain extent, I feel that the principles, the positivity needs to go hand in hand with the conferences that happened, not only in Nepal or South Asia, but even at the UN meetings, where we only talk about the violence, the hatred, and what needs to be put right, and how it needs to be put right according to how a certain group of people feel that they should be put right. So is there any way that we can promote your ideas, and with all the ideas that came up during these 2 days, to show that this is a principle that we've tried, has worked, and why don't we work in hand for certain issues? Because after all, people involved in this conference are the same, have the same objective, the same intentions, the same thoughts. And I feel that if we go about with that, and I had also pointed out the fact that in 1995, when the big Beyond Beijing conference declared that by 2015, the status of women in South Asia would be at par with the status of men. That didn't happen. And so what happened, conveniently, in 2015, they had another conference in all these countries which declared that the deadline had been pushed to 2030. So how far are we going to push the deadlines again and again? So isn't it time that we, a group who think positively, who believe in projecting positive examples, work together with them? So how do we find that connection? That was my question.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I have a couple of things. There are aspects of that maybe we should continue outside of the track, just thinking that this is the trauma and violence track. So there's definitely a conversation that I would love to continue I think there is a larger question as it relates to trauma and violence and media. And to me, still, even there's an invitation for us to see that we're co-creating the environment we are living in. You know, we all complain about a media culture that's overly aggressive, that's very fear-driven, and yet we respond to that too, right? So when people say we're measuring clicks and these kinds of stories get the most clicks, so we're going to continue to highlight them. The disastrous like stats get the most funding, so we're going to continue to use them. Right now, that's a reflection not on some them, but on all of us, that we're all still swayed in that direction, right? So for me, there is an invitation, I think, first of all, for ourselves to see that, oh, we're part of what we're calling as this dominant culture of fear and of aggression and of this drama as opposed to a neutral observation, but we're also still participating in it. You know, like if you look at what gets funded, you look at which newspaper headlines sell the most, you look online at what kind of headlines get the most clicks. We're fueling this cycle. And it's not so much something that we should now feel terrible about, but it's something to be aware of, that we are co-creators of that cycle, right? And for me, that also points to the solution of, so what do we do now? Because my what do we do now might be different from yours, right? But that for each of us, there's an opportunity to first see it differently for ourselves. Because one of the things I've realized with issues on which I have a lot of emotional charge is that it kind of blinds me. You know, I get very swayed by my own version of that story. And I then, in a way, act against myself unintentionally. I become unable to see, oh, what's the most helpful thing for me to do here? Because I get so caught up in it. And I work with a lot of women leaders, with women activists, with people in education and medicine, and just people who have that same feeling of like, oh, we want to make things better for people. But taking on the suffering of others in order to make it better for others just means they burn out quicker. And we lose some of our best people in these fields. They come in idealistic, they come in really wanting to help, and somehow they lose that piece of like a freedom and resilience within themselves, right? And somehow in losing that piece, they become less effective on the issues that they really, really care about. So for me, there's an invitation on, you know, for the whole weekend, I think, to kind of maybe get a longer perspective on my take on the issues I care about. And maybe with a kind of cooler head, I can see more clearly what's an area I want to impact. I mean, you mentioned with your daughter when we were talking, you know, that there's, when you feel really backed up and like you have to fight to prove yourself, you get very aggressive and very stressed. And I don't think we who care about the world realize how stressed we get. And here we are trying to bring peace and healing into the world while being stressed out like mad, right? And I mean, the irony of that takes sometimes a while to sink in. But it's worth that, to see that if we're trying to bring healing and relief to trauma and to violence and to the larger public sphere, it has got to start within ourselves.
Yeah.
Sure.
I
Okay.
totally agree with Mahima, because I think we've shared that common society. So I like the way you put the antidote up there. So my antidote to that issue, what is happening, like we are just capitalizing on showing dismal data, is like I initiated a venture called Celebrating Womanhood 14 years back, and we tried to identify women not only from the capital city where all the facilities are, but from rural villages, identify women who had been striving to make a change in their homes, their communities, bring them to the city, introduce them through the media, their work, and try to connect them with organizations. So this venture has been going on for the past 14 years, and so far we have identified 130 women. So I feel honored that I have come across 130 women who have made a change in the lives, not only of themselves and of others. And 14 years, I would say, like, if you cut it down in 50% of the women that we've come across, because that's when we started getting more and more confident of ourselves, and we started outreaching more to the rural sectors. The stories, one of the stories I shared yesterday, we've come across are of women who have been through the most difficult situations in their lives. They're women who have been exchanged for a pair of bullocks when they are 5 by their father because they were too poor, and how they emerged leaders of their communities later on. They've been women who've been beaten, battered, how they survived, and then not only survived, but have become a source of inspiration for others. So there's so many stories. So one of the initiatives that I've started now is, since in Nepal, there's also like a group which, in a way, I feel like we are not being able to project these positive stories as much as I would like. So I have tied up with Dr. Sarah Parker of UK Liverpool University, and together we are working on the first 30 to 50 stories to be documented and then taught at the university as an example of how resilient and how women can come out of trauma. So why UK? Why not Nepal, where it's needed? Because, unfortunately, sadly, people there are not ready to listen to what women have to say. So we have to, if we have an endorsement of an international entity, then they will take up notice, oh, so this really means something. And so maybe we can learn this in Nepali too. So I'm working the reverse way, because I tried going from the Nepali way, it didn't work, but I didn't give up. So now we're working on those stories to make it, publicize it, have it online, and then having it translated in Nepali, and go and approach the college to where gender and gender women's studies are being taught in Nepal. So that is my personal, how do I put it, passion, or the change that I'm trying to bring about. It's not been easy, it's not easy. I still face a lot of challenges in a lot of ways, but I haven't given up. And one of the reasons that I chose to come here is maybe I can tie up with people who believe in this cause as much as I do, and maybe we can make it happen even here. So, yeah.
So, just to generalize this, because I think although you're very passionately committed, you're coming up with wonderful solutions to a problem that is in your country, but not unique to your country by any means. This is true across the world, and it's not just women, but women are a hot topic. But I want to offer a practical piece of information that might neutralize the upset about the way data is used, and then I want to offer a more spiritual answer. So the practical answer is, we measure what can be measured, and you can't measure the immutable, and you can't measure what hasn't happened. Now, I've worked in the field of prevention for years, and the biggest problem that we have in the field of prevention is the research is suspect, because if you prevent something, how can you prove it didn't happen because of what you did?
That's right.
So like in Chicago, when that whole community changes and everybody goes, yeah, it really changed, how can you say it was the initiative of the Rebels for Peace? Because we can't tell what caused that change, because we can't measure it, because people changed from within, and it came from the spiritual nature of people, not from, we built new houses and we fixed up the park and we painted the fences, So the reason why we live in a world in which, in the state of the level of consciousness, the state of mind the world is in now, we're much more interested in results that we can measure, or situations that we can measure. And that's how money is allocated. So prevention is always underfunded, even though it's the answer to everything. And we are, if you look at the work we do in the principles, we are a prevention idea. Because if you can reach children before they ever learn to take their thinking seriously, they'll never take their thinking seriously, and they won't act out. you know? But if you wait till they act out, it's not prevention anymore, it's treatment. So, you know, we're in the treatment world, and we're talking about something that's so much deeper than treatment that the world has trouble hearing it. I hope that neutralizes a little bit. It's like you have to have compassion for these poor souls, because that's how the world works. Now, from a spiritual standpoint, the most, and I've taught this for years, and anybody who's ever taken my course would see it again and again. The most interesting model, and Roger Mills really started developing it, and then I called Roger because I was teaching, I wanted to add some more to it, and I don't have to write it up or anything, it's very simple. But, and then I heard Roger talking about it in a talk he was doing for social workers, but it hadn't kind of gotten fully formed. But here's what he was trying to say, that if you look at the evolution of compassionate care, you know, at the very bottom is commiseration. You know, well, no wonder you're mad. If I were in your circumstances, I'd be mad too. You know, you have a right to be mad. Let's go out and march. You know, let's get the so-and-sos, you know. And, you know, as people discover that doesn't work, then the next level up from that is sympathy. You know, oh, you poor soul. Oh, let me help you. Let me do something for you. I know this is so hard, and I know you're suffering and struggling, you know, but I can help you, you know. But the problem with that is the empowerment is missing. You know, so that's a well-meaning, loving, caring thing. My students are very drawn to sympathy, you know, because they want it, basically. So they think, yeah, that's what people want. You know, I want people, when I break up with my boyfriend, I want my people crying with me, you know. So, you know, so there, you know, that was a model. That still is a model out in the world. But then people who say, well, that's not really working out for people because now they're becoming dependent. You know, we have so much sympathy, they keep coming back saying, well, are you sorry about this now? Can you fix it? And so the next level up from that is compassion. And compassion is a higher level of caring because it says, I understand. I truly understand. And, you know, we're in this together. We can work together, but, you know, I'll lead you to a solution because I have such compassion for you and I really understand what you're going through. Well, that's nicer, but in every one of those caring models, the operative word is, I know something you don't know. And you poor thing. You know, now, Roger says when he was trying to point to this the first time, then we worked on this model together and we both have taught it over the years, but when you get to the next level, it's equality. And that's when you can look at a person and say, you have everything I have. You're not lacking anything. We're all in this together and we're all perfectly wise. We're all perfectly able to see beyond our circumstances. We all have answers. So let me point you to where yours might be for you, because I don't know what to do for you. You know what to do for you. And that's called empowerment. And the three principles has always been known as an empowerment model. Now, what we've seen happen in community after community after community from this work is that when you point people to the source of their own power, joy, wisdom, capacity, they solve the problem. You don't need to ask yourself, what are we going to do? Because they'll do it. And they're all different. And I remember there's one community in California, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen about this, but where the women in the community got together. The problem was there were so many drug dealers and there were all these gunfights and people were accidentally getting shot because they happened to be there, and you know, and it was a really dangerous, horrible situation, and I won't go into getting too specific. The women got together, and this is like a okay, it's a very difficult, impoverished, you know, years and years of violence, very high murder rate, very depressing community, mostly black people. And what did they decide to do? They made wanted posters, like the Old West. Now, I don't know a social worker in the world that would have walked into a black community and said, let's make wanted posters, you know, like the cowboys. But that's what they came up with. And the wanted posters were, everybody knew who the bad people were that were dealing drugs, but nobody wanted to talk about it. But everybody, you know, somebody had a mama or a sister or an aunt that would bring a picture. They put the pictures of these people up on the wanted posters, and it said wanted in some other neighborhood, not here. And they posted them after, you know, just at dusk before everybody was you know, that's when the dealers all come out. And the dealers are out there and they're looking around, they're going, oh my God, that's my picture. And the police are around, you know, taking pictures of the pictures. They disappeared.
Not the posters.
No, the people. the people in the, we don't know where they went. Nobody knows. The police had their pictures, so I'm sure that a lot of them were found. They were gone. Who would have thought that you could drive drug dealers out of a community in 24 hours? Well, yeah, all you got to do is post their picture. You know, they don't like that. You know, so, and make sure the cops get it, you know. Now, that is a solution that could only come from within that community. There is no way that solution, and it may never ever be used again anywhere else ever, because those ladies were driven and impassioned by the creativity of their excellent idea that they thought of themselves. And I am telling you that when people see something and they act on what they see, not what you tell them to see, when they act on what they see, who knows what the heck they'll come up with, but answers come out of nowhere, and they're amazingly creative, and they work. And the same thing is true with children. If you ask children, what should I do with this person in the class, you know, that's keeping us from doing our work, they know what to do, because they're kids too. You know, you ask teachers, they'll say, send them to the principal, because that's the answer in the handbook, you know, but the answer in the creative universe could be very different from that. So, you know, this is the answer in the long run. What the principles offer is when people feel it, see it, know it. I am the thinker of my thoughts. I am the creator of my life. I am empowered by the same wisdom, the same common sense. I have as much as the wisest, most famous person in the world. I have access to that. That is me. God knows what they'll do, but they'll fix it. Yes. Is that a what?
Creed.
Is that like something that we can get access to? You would just
You got it, baby. It's in you. What do you mean you can get access to? That is who we are. That is who we are. That is what the principles are telling us. That is, we are, all of humankind is connected to the same source of universal, divine, inspired wisdom. You can't kill it, because you're too small to kill the big thing. You can't do that. It's in there whether you want it or not, whether you like it or not, whether you thought you had it or not, it's there. And as soon as you live it, give it a little bit of room, boom, there it is. You know? And you gotta realize that that's what spiritual means. Spiritual is not us, it's we're the form. Spiritual is the formless energy that allows us to be. So anyway, I'm sorry I get all excited about this. Yeah, unfortunately, I have been invited to preach, and it got to me, you know.
It is Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Okay, praise the Lord.
I was just going to share, it's just another similar story of like, and I think you said the ideas people come up with are creative, and they're also so like common sense obvious that we've overcomplicated in our heads.
Yeah.
So this you might have heard about this in the media, but there was a group of moms in Inglewood, in a neighborhood in Chicago, that was particularly violent. And 4th of July weekend was always very violent. Summer is always violent. But and they just decided, they have a name for themselves, I can't remember now, it's an acronym, but they decided that, you know, they're like, these kids are not going to shoot each other if we're around. And so they just took shifts, and they sat on the corner of this one particular intersection for those 4 days over the holiday weekend. And I don't even know how many shootings would typically have been there, probably like 100 and something over the course of the weekend, and there weren't any. Because
I
the
saw
moms
that
were
in the
just,
newspaper.
Yeah, I think it got some media attention. Just the moms just sat outside, And now they've organized and they're doing more things. I mean, they're not on a 24-hour watch, but you know,
Yeah.
they're doing more.
And they're cooking. They're
and-
serving food.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
such an obvious thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
they're not going to do it if their mom's sitting there, right?
Right.
Go figure.
But then they just finally said, we're going to, you know, we don't feel like we're getting, this isn't fixing itself, so what can we
Yeah.
do? Well,
And it's a real bad idea to shoot somebody else's mom, too. Yeah, Dejan.
That's actually a rule for gangbangers. We don't mess with old people, mothers, and children.
Yeah.
That's a rule. So
That's
that was
the
a good
rule.
idea. That's like
That's a great idea. Oh, I did not know that. That's a good thing to know. You know, and that to me,
you're
see,
covered,
that-
Judy. I
that
think you
is-
fit into a category there.
That is the proof, Dejan, to me, of the wisdom that's
Wisdom.
awake in
In
people, even when
everybody.
they're out to kill. Everybody has a point beyond which they will not go. That's a moral compass. And we can keep changing our moral compass as we see more deeply into life. But, you know, that's like, you know, prisoners. There's certain people that they don't mess with in prison, but they'll kill a pedophile, you know? And so people everybody's got a point beyond which they go, you know, no, I'm not going there. And I think we have to see that as health. That's the starting point to say, you know, you have health in you. You have this beauty in you that, you know, kind of tells you, there's some things you just don't touch, you know? And you could consider, are there other things you might not want to touch if you really got in touch with life, you know? Anyway, I'm sorry.
I'm going to change the track a little bit because what you said about, you know, we overcomplicate things, it reminded me. So my sister-in-law, she's a teacher, right, in India. And she said that there was the school, like all the faculty were like abuzz with this one incident that happened that morning, which is all the kids in, I don't know what grade they are, she was 8 years old, so I have no idea what grade that is, right? But she was 8 years old, anyway. So they had this assignment where they had like colors for that week, right? So that day they were all gonna go home and they were gonna write something about the color red and bring it back to class the next day. So everybody brought in their stuff about, you know, red, and there was one girl whose write-up on that was super adult content. It was very, it was like fully pornographic, right? And now this girl is 8 years old, and so of course all the teachers go into this panic, right? They're all talking to each other, they phone the parents, they go to the principal, the parents are stunned, they're like, no, I mean, that's not the kind of house we live in. I don't know where this has come from. And there's all of this conversation. And it's like 4 PM before somebody decides to go ask the kid, right? And then they go ask the kid, and what happens is she finds her mom's iPad over there, she types in red, and just copies the first thing that comes up. She has this... But I mean, there's been this whole investigation about like what to do with this kid, right? But I mean, the common sense just escapes us. Yeah.
I love that story.
Wow.
You had something to say about resilience, which would be very cool to hear the story.
Well, I think what I wanted to do following the first 2 sessions, we've mostly talked about violence in terms of wars, murders, things that have happened that are external. And, you know, if we're sitting here talking about it, probably didn't happen to us. And I wanted, it was sort of intentional that we used the terms trauma and violence. And for me at least, the primary element of trauma are things that have happened to us. And this is much more frequent in many ways than the violence we're perceiving in the society as a whole. And I thought it would be helpful if we could think about the ways of perceiving trauma, whether it be a broken leg, or in my case, a new heart valve. Excuse me, I hit the mic. A new heart valve this past June. Or any number of events that happen in life. We were talking in an earlier session about the woman got dumped when she went home.
Yeah.
You know, oh, wow, that's life-changing. You
Or
know,
not.
Or not. Because for her, it was, well, I can think of that, a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's helpful for us to think of how people respond to what is perceived as trauma, when trauma can also be your friend, your opening to a new perception, a new way of life, but it can also be crippling and demeaning and creating dependencies. And so I had mentioned, I think at our last session, a little bit about Bobby Heron, and I had told the story about how she had started this group in the women's jail in New Hampshire. What I didn't tell you is that part of the reason that she wasn't able to actually come was that in the last 6 months, I think, 5 to 6 months, she has lost her sight. So she is, blind and is now finding her way with the white cane. But for her, she has taken that as a gift, because now she sees the world differently in ways that she would never have perceived the world. And she's able to hear and feel at levels that she had never dreamed possible. And so I think that part of what we wanted to get across in this track was that people are not broken, even if they've suddenly been made blind, that is in fact the universe opening up in a new way. And that our role in community is honoring those openings. So.
And not pitying them.
Yeah, certainly not feeling the pity or the compassion or the. But to me, that's part of what of the element, just one element of this principal understanding that is, I think, is helpful for each of us as we perceive others. So, any response or comment? There you go, Jamie.
Yes, I'm not supposed to be in here. I'm breaking a rule here. I haven't been in the other 2 sessions.
It's okay.
My ego was awake enough, so I thought I'd join you guys. So when you mentioned that about the broken leg, to me that's such a great example of how automatic and how inborn this resilience is.
Yes.
My son, a couple of years ago, was goofing off with his buddies and broke his leg, literally broke his leg below the knee, and he had to have surgery. He had to have 2 screws put in and a full leg cast and all that. And the thing that really stuck out to me was that the healing started to take place as soon as the break happened.
Right.
The body was already working on that. Now, the doctors understand how the system works, that if you put the bones together, they will grow back together. And the cast provides protection.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, if we didn't do that, it would still heal at the best level it could, although he wouldn't be able to walk, it would be crooked.
Right.
But the system is built in. The doctors did not heal his leg, and he did not heal his leg.
No,
it was
life.
It was life, and it was happening automatically. This resilience that we talk about, and when it comes to trauma, what they're doing in relation to their trauma is the best they know to do given their understanding. And when they do have more understanding, then it makes sense to relate differently to it. So without understanding, trauma can be debilitating. It can lead to all kinds of other problems. And I think the field sees that now. There's so much attention to trauma-informed care. But without understanding that that you don't do resilience, that you don't build resilience.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so resilience building it's impossible.
It's a waste of time. Yeah.
And it's like saying, I think I'm going to try to stay on the ground today. I don't want to float up.
Yeah.
It's impossible. I mean, regardless of whether I hold on to the chair or not, I'm going to stay on the ground. And resilience is that way too. And so I think just regardless of the content of the trauma or regardless of the details of what happened, knowing that the second that it happened, that the healing is already happening, and that it's not on us, we're not there to put the healing in them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and 2 things that reminded me of was, one is, if people think we have this wonderful, incredible, amazing body that does all these things that we don't even understand. But when you talk about the psychological immune system, they go, oh, no, that's not possible. So say, what creator, come on, would give us a body that took care of itself and a mind that didn't? I mean, for God's sake. Anyway. But and also I think sometimes we tend to see other people's trauma through our eyes as though it was happening to us instead of asking through their eyes. And this very briefly, this reminded me of one of the very first things when I was learning from Bill Pettit. Of course, I didn't know very much about anything in the mental health field except that I was very stressed. And of course, I would never go to a psychiatrist, but fortunately I had one as a client, so I could hang out with him. And so we were walking through the courthouse. I think we went to file something regarding his business or something, and we were walking through the courthouse, and in the courthouse in Manatee County at that time, there's a little candy stand, and it was always run by a blind person. Which is hard because you got to remember that people who know they're blind will take money. But anyway, we're walking past, and Bill looks over and he says, "Oh, let's go get a candy bar," which was not like him. So we walked over to the candy stand, and he says, "Hi, I'd like I don't know what, Milky Way or whatever." And she just lit up, and she said, "Oh, Dr. Pettit." And he said, "Yeah," and he gave her a big hug, and he bought the candy bars, and we started to walk away, and I said, "How do you know her?" And he said, "Well, I just know her." And she said, wait. And she said, "He can't tell you, but I can. I was his patient." And so here's the story. She was in a violent relationship, and she got caught in the middle of a terrible bar fight in which there was shooting involved, and she had a bullet that passed through her head and blinded her. And so when she's in the hospital, she was freaking out. She was very bitter and upset, and they called him. He happened to be on call, so Dr. Pettit saw her. And of course, she calmed down, and she found she found her own resilience. She found peace. She was able to retouch that part of herself because she quieted down. And she said, "I'm so grateful because I'm very happy now, and my whole life is very different." And because being a former newspaper reporter, new to the principles and maybe a little rude, I said, but you're blind. And she said, yes, but not really. And I said, well, if you could have your eyesight back, would you trade whatever's happened to you since for your eyesight? And she said, no, not at all. She said, given what I see inside, I'd rather be blind. So we videotaped her, and we used to show that tape all over the place. People didn't believe it. Like she must have been an actress. No, she was the candy lady in the courthouse. Yeah. But see, I couldn't see that she might be okay with it because I wasn't okay with it, Yeah. Yes. Yes, it is. It's on.
So as you were talking about trauma and our own body's ability to mend and our innate wisdom and healing, I started thinking about trees. And I don't know if you've ever been in a place where a tree, there's been a bike or a barbed wire fence, and the tree has grown around that barbed wire. And we say, oh, but how amazing. What would happen, however, if we decided to remove the bike from the tree? The damage, you
could kill it.
And it does become a form of coexistence that, and the tree can still thrive. So it's not always desirable to rip that out of the innate wisdom, of the tree. It sort of takes away agency. So.
Yeah, because the tree decided what to do. We didn't tell it what to do.
Right, and we wouldn't and couldn't. I mean, I guess we could prune the tree or do lots of different things, but what does that really keep in mind what the tree wants to do?
Right.
So.
What the tree knows as wisdom.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
On the topic of trauma and resilience, we went through the great earthquake in 2015. So I live up on a hill, and nearby there's a community of farmers who produce vegetables, and they come selling vegetables door to door. That's the culture, part of the culture in my country. So there was a lady who used to come almost every morning with green, fresh vegetables to sell the vegetables. So after the earthquake, for 3 days, of course, she disappeared because I guess nobody was really in the frame of mind to go continue their daily activities. After the 3rd day, on the 4th day, she arrived at a doorstep with her basket full of fresh vegetables. And I said, oh my God, because we knew through the news that the village that she lived in, Kokana, that was badly damaged. Most of the houses just collapsed. So I said, are you okay? Is your house okay? And she said, as a matter of fact, no, my house also went down like the rest. And I said, so how come you're here? And she said, well, I have to make a living. I have to go on. I have family, I have children. And I said, okay, fine, but how are you with money? Can I give you some extra money so that you can buy certain things that you might need? And she said, no, this is enough for me. And that was such a touching moment. Her house had fallen down. Some of her neighbors were dead. She was going through that trauma more than me because luckily our houses didn't fall down. But she had lost everything. And still she was going about her daily activities saying, as a matter of fact, well, life has to go on. And then that was one example, and upon the earthquake, I'll make this quick. A couple of my friends are surgeons here in the US, so they wrote to me and they formed groups, and they had brought along a trauma expert counselor to counsel people on the shock that they might be going through. But what they discovered is they started asking for, okay, can you point us to groups who need trauma counseling? Because we go to these little villages and they're smiling and they're offering us lunch. I think there was one famous, one of the CNN reporters also reported this, that she was interviewing a woman whose house had fallen down and she offered him lunch. So that's part of the culture. So the trauma counselors did not have work because they could not find patients.
Traumatic.
Yeah. So that was resiliency for us because we lived in a world where every day was like a challenge. So I guess we're a bit better equipped to deal with what we call trauma.
And you can see that in children. I remember when the Oklahoma City bombing happened here and the building fell and there was a daycare center in the building. A number of the children were injured and they took all the children and put them in a safe place in a hurry, just provided toys and, snacks and just, someone to watch over them while they kind of worked on the... So by the time the counselors, and this was funny because I remember just the news person who typically asked, oh, how long is it going to be before these kids ever recover from this? And they're in the daycare center, and the kids are laughing and playing with the toys and drinking their juice. And I was thinking, look around, turn your head. And the counselor's saying, oh, it could be scarring them for life. They will suffer, blah, blah, blah. Have you noticed them?
Have you asked the kids?
Yeah. Yeah. But, because we're born to survive and thrive. That's in our DNA. It's in our nature. That's the spiritual gift that we have. Yes. Yeah, of course.
Okay, so I'm Mormon, and my son went on a mission, and there's a lot of pressure to do that. He went for 6 weeks, and then he came home, and he came home because of anxiety, depression. It just wasn't working, and he left from California. He came home to Utah, and he went to a counselor, and he said, "Well, do you want medication? I've got this problem." And he said, "Well, I just came home from a mission. I'm living with my parents. I have no friends, and I have no direction of what to do next. Shouldn't I be miserable?" It's like, doesn't that sound like how it should be? Why would I need medication for that? I thought, wow, where did that come from?
That's great.
Yeah,
just
and
live
with
it. Be with it.
It's kind of people are miserable sometimes, and a lot of people say, well, if I understood the principles, I'd be happy all the time. No, you won't. I'm sorry, that is not the promise. The promise is when you're unhappy, you'll know that it's going to pass and you'll be fine again.
Thank you, Anita. That prompted a memory that on August 12th here in Charlottesville, I was part of a mental health first aid team during the day. I was deep inside a church doing auricular acupuncture. I treated 18 people that day, many of whom had been at the scene of the crash. So I was dealing with heavily traumatized people who were in shock. And it was, while I felt physically safe that day, it was a very big day to be part of. And I was so grateful that there was a way I could serve given what was happening. And in the days after that, I went through such a process around what had happened in our town and what it meant and what my role was and what I could be doing, et cetera, et cetera. But I had this sense that having been 1 degree removed from the accident, the terrorist act, really, and being with these very traumatized people, that I somehow really had been traumatized too. That I was deeply shaken by my experience. But what I had that idea that there would be some residual work to do around the trauma that I had experienced, and it was pointed out to me by one of the people that I trade with. This is a guy who does Rolfing or structural integration, and he said, "It sounds like you think you should have some stuff to work with about that, but is that true?" And I realized I am enormously resilient. I'm actually, I am a survivor of many, many things. Couple rounds of cancer, childhood sexual abuse, a lot of emotional abuse and negligence in my childhood. There's all kinds of things that I could say, like, because of that I am somehow not able, but the truth is I'm enormously resilient. I am incredibly effective. I do a lot of things that help make the world better, and I'm totally fine. And having gotten to do that was actually what I'm built for. This is the right use of me. And so I'm, the idea that your son thinks that those things equal miserable, I'm like, I would ask into that, because I don't think that, I mean, people who have gone through what I've gone through could have the experience of victimhood in life, and that's not how I'm living. And my first exposure to 3P, which is now 5 years ago, what I came to see about my childhood was that none of that is happening now, and the only thing about that history that's in the present moment is what I bring into the present moment. And that's not a Pollyanna-ish way of denying that I have that history, but so what? That's not, I'm not living that now except if I say so. And I'm not saying so. I'm saying something really different. And so I'm my heart to your son to say, doesn't necessarily have to look like miserable, and it certainly doesn't need medication necessarily either. Right, he doesn't need the meds, but he also doesn't need to be miserable just because those things line up that way.
Yeah, I mean,
But
for me,
if
this...
I'm sorry. No, you please go ahead.
Well, for me, with relevance to trauma or life things, right, it's always, I find, ultimately a personal journey, right? Like, I feel like at certain points in my life, it has been really helpful that, at some point, I got to a place where I thought, this is totally not okay. I mean, not okay with me. I mean, it's sick. I don't enjoy it. I don't like this anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. And part of that realization can be an acknowledgement that actually I've been really miserable for the last 2 years doing this thing that I really didn't want to do. And sometimes the process turns out such that I look around and I say, okay, it's okay. I don't like this so much, but I'm fine. There's other things that are working out well. But I feel like that insight into your own life is just such a personal thing. Like sometimes an insight is not always like, it's not always worded in the positive, I guess is what I mean. Sometimes you see that you've been deliberately blind to an aspect of your life that is really profoundly unhelpful to yourself, right? Sometimes we have moments of suffering and you realize there has been rich learning in that. So I feel like that relationship of yourself to your life is just a very personal learning curve of, in a way, just getting to know yourself and learning to hear yourself better. You know, and I think there's just phases.
This is another like yes and situation. I feel like kind of pointing to what you're saying. Like things are so individual, and there's so much wisdom in saying, okay, I'm down now. Like things have been really hard. It doesn't mean I need medication, right? And there's so much wisdom in saying, and circumstances don't determine our being down.
Yeah.
And there's also can be wisdom in taking medication sometimes. Like I have had all of that. You know, there have been times where, you know, even with everything I know, I've been like, you know what, I can't hear truth right now. Like, I don't know what's going on, but no matter who I talk to, I'm not hearing it. I'm going to give myself a little bolster and go on medication for a little bit of time. You know, it's been a while, but there was a time when I did that. But I think what matters, what makes a difference to me is that there isn't a steady state.
That's right.
Thought is constantly flowing. And so miserable in this moment doesn't mean miserable in the next moment. And happy in this moment does not mean not miserable tomorrow for a moment. You know, whatever I think, I'm going to have that experience. And I went really low like a few months ago, and it surprised me because I've been feeling really grind. I was starting to feel a little bit untouchable, you know, like, oh, bring it on, bring it on. And I went down. And it's like Sid used to say, if the one thing humanity learned was not to be scared of their experience, that alone would save the world, that would change the world. Because it wasn't my being so down that was the problem. It was that it scared me. I made meaning of it, you know? But I went through a down time and then I came back. You know, there just is not a permanent, so I feel like it can be easy to point to, and I think, Judy, you said something like, it can easy to look like this means we're going to feel good all the time.
Yeah, no.
Like, I'm not in I don't feel like I'm in charge of that. Like, there's energy coming all the time in the form of thought. And it's going to bring me the full range of experience. And at this moment, I am so in love with that. Like, I honor that. I bow to that. Thank God that I get the full storm, the full weather pattern. Because I don't want to live in a place that's sunny all the time. I mean, some people love that, but I really love the weather. And I can't say I love every moment that I'm down, but I just feel like I've got the human package. Thank you. The human package includes everything. And then I've got wisdom, and it's always there, no matter what moment I'm in. And it's going to look different than anybody else.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Say, just one brief word. You sort of disclosed the name of our organization, the Center for Sustainable Change. We've been confused so often with environmental or this or that, but when you actually think about that change is always happening, and we can choose the change that we want to be more that sustains us. That's where our name begins to make sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. Audrey?
Yeah, Audrey.
Sorry.
Thank you. This is very brief, but I remember, Dave, when you told me that Center has, the CSE, Center for Sustainable Change, has two meanings.
Yeah.
The one that really connected me was center as a verb.
That's right.
Because when we're centered, we're in touch with our wisdom, and that's our true liberation.
That's great.
So I wanted to thank you for that. Yes.
I told myself I wasn't going to say more than one thing, but I can't help myself. I just love this topic, and it's so relevant, and it's so true, and something that lately I've been finding myself saying a lot is that mental health is not about feeling good all the time. It's about being okay with feeling bad.
Right.
And that if you look at young children, they don't care about feeling bad. They really don't. They're not asking for a self-help book, with pictures. I can't read yet, but I want to see the pictures of the self-help book. They're not asking for therapy. I mean, they just get over themselves very easily and very naturally. And so speaking to the point about feeling miserable, and it's an interesting paradox that the more you try not to feel something, the more it tends to hang around. And so being okay with feeling bad opens you up to new thought, like even thinking about the past. We're rewriting history every time we think about the past based on our state now. So, one person, the abuse, they feel horrible because of their abuse. And then you ask them another day and they say, you know what, the abuse is what made me who I am today. And I'm grateful that I was abused. I would never want anybody to go through that, but because of what happened to me, I'm able to help others. And so you can see how moment to moment life is, and how fluid it is, and how it's never what we think it is. And that is just such a hopeful message. I get so I want to get on a soapbox about it. I get preachy about it sometimes, but if the field could just see that people are okay, They really are. They just don't know it. They really are okay.
Yeah, and the good news about that, though, is people can see it. And I'll give you a brief example of that. So I had a client. I see clients as a mental health educator, not as a counselor or a therapist, because I'm not fixing people. But I educate them about the nature of their mental health. And a lot of clients choose that because it sounds more hopeful, I guess. So I see clients at something called the Women's Resource Center in Bradenton. So a lot of the people that come there are women that have suffered various types of abuse. And so this woman had been to a lot of therapy until she ran out of insurance benefits. And she had seen several people, and she had received a number of diagnoses. So she was depressed, bipolar. One person had some schizoid something or other so she had like 5 diagnoses. And she said, this is so terrible because they can't even figure out what's wrong with me. And she said, everybody I see gives me a different diagnosis, and I look them up, and it's so hopeless because these are terrible experiences. And I don't even know which one I am, or am I all of them? And I said, let me just ask you something. I said, what if you were none of them? And she said, well, I'd be fine. And I said, well, give it a shot. Since nobody seems to know what's wrong with you, maybe there's somebody right with you. And it's so funny because she started laughing and she said, yeah, I really just want to feel all right. And these people keep telling me what's wrong with me, and then I'm looking to see how to fix it instead of just being all right. And that's how easy it is for people to see it in themselves. Not everybody turns on a dime, but that was like one of those moments where, that's what she was looking for, was the answer to why can't they diagnose her? Well, maybe because there isn't anything wrong with her, And also we have to remember, like if you have the flu, you're really sick while you have the flu, and then it goes away. And you go, oh, I had the flu last week, I felt like hell, but now I feel good, Well, sometimes people get really upset and they go to a doctor, and at that moment they have the psychological flu. So the doctor doesn't say, this is temporary, you're just caught in a cycle of negative thoughts, by next week you should start feeling a little better. They say, oh my God, this could be bipolar. We better put you into the mental hospital for observation. Mm-hmm. Now this is innocent, but we forget that a diagnosis is a snapshot in time. Mm-hmm. And I cannot tell you how many times I've told my clients, have you ever been to a dinner party and somebody took a picture of you and you just look awful? Don't show it around. Because it was just a bad picture. It was that moment, and pretty soon, later on, there's some better picture where you were smiling and you look good, show that one. And people get that we go in and out of stuff, and it passes naturally because we're psychologically equipped for that to happen. But if somebody diagnoses us, that's really scary for people. People don't realize the power of that. That's the power of thought. I think there's something terribly wrong with me. And then this guy said, yeah, there's a name for that. Oh, and he's an expert. Oh my God, how bad is this going to be? Will my insurance cover it? What am I going to do about my family? And sometimes people are just bummed out,
Could you say something about, because I've seen this before, where there is a contingent of these type of clients who like the fact that they've been labeled and have a diagnosis and have a name, and they identify with it, and they're sort of married to it. They feel like this is, and almost it's sometimes harder to convince them that there's not something wrong with them rather than that there is.
Yeah.
Could you say something about that, Judy?
Yeah, sure. I see these people all the time because they're people that have been seeing therapists for years and, really are very attached to they built their whole life around their diagnosis. And I understand that. It's like I built my whole life around being an intelligent, smart person who started a business. It's the same thing, it was important to me. I thought that was who I was, and so as long as I thought that was who I was, that's who I was. Until I decided it was kind of painful to be that and I wanted to be something else. So my goal with people like that is to stay away from any conversation at all about their diagnosis and talk to them about life and and just talk about whatever. I mean, I ask them, do you have a pet? Do you have a hobby? What do you go to church? Tell me about your friends. Tell me about your kids. I mean, just things that they can talk about, that they would talk about. I don't ask them personal stuff. But, and when people relax and they start chatting, gal to gal, oh, I love, and this one woman was crocheting a baby blanket and it turned into a giant queen size thing because she just didn't know when to stop, and she thought that was hilarious, and she had it with her. She pulled it out and she said, I don't know how big this thing's gonna get. But it was perfect, because how big is this thing gonna get? It's as big as you until you stop. And I said, gee, that's kind of like your diagnosis, isn't it? There's no telling how big that thing could get. And she said, oh, shit. So I really think a lot of it is we just don't laugh enough with our clients. We feel like it's disrespectful to be lighthearted. If somebody comes in and says, I'm a whatever, but since I don't believe in the whatever, because everything is just insecurity taking whatever form, to me the DSM is just a list of all the various ways people have used their insecure thinking against themselves and been noticed. And the reason it gets bigger is because we keep noticing it more and more. And people are infinitely creative, and God knows how big the damn thing will get, So, but actually yeah, it's enough, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say thank you. That's perfect. And it brought to mind a story that I was teaching a class at the hospital about therapeutic communication, and the whole point of it was that it wasn't about what you said or even how you say it. It's about where you're coming from. And so I used this. They really struggled with this example, but I had a situation where I was working with a mom, and of a kid, and she was sharing all these horrific details of her life. And I was just in a nice feeling, and we had a really good rapport, and I looked her in the eyes and I said, I don't care what you've been through. Now, that's on content-wise, that sounds horrible. Like, they were like, how could you say that? But that connected with her because she felt that it didn't matter. And I said, I don't care what you've been through because it doesn't matter now. And she felt that. Now, as a strategy, if you left here saying, okay, I'm going to start telling people that I don't care what they've been through. Because there have been clients where I wouldn't say that.
Well, you would never say it. When you say what comes to you.
But it came to, yes. And
through your wisdom.
But so using that's a great example with the crocheting.
But they will always give you something.
That's right.
This is what I learned from Bill Pennant. If you listen long enough or you chat about life with people and don't talk about what's wrong with them, they will always give you a chance to take them back to the principles. They give it to you. She gave me her crocheting. Other people give me other stuff. But the other thing, I have to tell you a funny George Pransky story. I worked out at Pransky and Associates for almost 10 years, and one time I was sitting in with George when I had first gotten there, and this client was one of the really whiny people, that, oh my God, this happened, and then this happened, and this other thing happened, and it's just all these terrible things keep happening to me, and he's going on and on. Finally stopped to take a breath, and George, said, wow. And the guy said, see, I bet you agree that, how am I supposed to feel better? And George said, no, actually, I was sitting here thinking how grateful I am it never happened to me. Now in that moment, the client laughed. Now, that sounds so heartless and thoughtless and terrible, but George had rapport. He was present with that person, and he knew they just needed a break from all this whiny thinking, and he gave them a chance to laugh at themselves. And, and honestly, one time I was following Bill around, and he went in the hospital, and there was this Italian woman. This was back in the days when Saturday Night Live had Father Guido Sarducci. Oh, yeah. And if you're not old enough, just bear with me. So, and Father Guido Sarducci, is this phony priest with the phony Italian accent. So there's an Italian woman in the hospital, an older Italian woman, and Bill's been called in as a consult, and she's really pissed off because people discriminate against her because she's Italian, and she's depressed about her neighbors don't like her, and so Bill comes in and listens to her whole story, and all of a sudden he comes up to her and he rips his glasses off, and he says, you mean to tell me you're an Italian person and you're complaining? He says, what right do you got to complain? And she's like looking at him, and he's doing this phony Italian accent. And then he's like, I'm sick of this, But he says, I'm going to help you. He says, I'm going to tell you this. He says, you would think about that all of the time, all of the time. You just to keep thinking that. Because my daughter has to go to college. Honest to God, I was dying. I was there going like, oh my God, how could he possibly do this? She started howling. And the next thing you know, she leaps up out of her bed and she throws her arms around him and she says, I'm in love with you. But, you know, the thing is, that's what comes from within us. When we talk about reaching into your wisdom, we can't tell you what to say. We can't give you a technique. Don't ever do any of the things we've told you, you know, because they are not you, they're us in the moment, you know. I would never do half the stuff I've seen people do, but I do what I do, and people go, God, that was terrible, and I go, well, it worked out, you know. So, you know, you have to remember when you're talking to a human being, you're spirit to spirit, and that connection gives you permission out of love to say the thing that occurs to you that seems helpful to you right then.
Because
and even if it's crazy, if it feels helpful, you go ahead with it. You know, like I went with Bill one time and there was a person who had been, the nurses didn't want me to go in there because this person was locked in a secure room because they were so violent when they were brought into the mental hospital, but he couldn't get there till morning. And we got there and he was in this padded cell basically, and he said, well, you know, let me just go in and talk to him. And the nurse said, oh, I can't let you do that because, you know, we have to have security before you can go in. He said, I'm sorry, I'm a doctor, give me the key. Which Bill very rarely did, but he did that, kind of pulled the doctor card. Yeah. So, and then I'm following him, and she said, she can't go, and Bill said, yes, she can. So we opened the door, and the guy's crouched in the corner, and there's all this shredded paper all over the cell. He's torn up every magazine. There were magazines in there. Why they did that, I don't know. But anyway, there are magazines in there, and he shredded them all. So Bill walks into the cell, and he looks at the guy who's kind of cowering in the corner. He says, done a little light reading, have you? And the guy looks up at him, he says, who are you? And Bill says, well, who are you? And he says, well, I'm the crazy person, you tell me. And then they got into this, no, you tell me. And the next thing you know, the guy's laughing his head off, you know? And we walk out of the cell together, and Bill says, can we have a counseling room? I want to talk to him. And the nurse is like, you know, letting him loose. Yeah. You know, you just took the crazy person out of the padded cell. But he was fine. He was walking along with Bill, and he went to the counseling room, and they had a nice session. Because Bill didn't take his crazy seriously. He's looking for the health in him. And you know where the health is? It's in joy and humor. That's health. Yeah. That's where it is. No, it is funny. It's like, but don't do it. You know? You do what occurs to you, please. But don't be hesitant to be lighthearted. People really like that. There's not enough of that in this world.
You know, I just thought of something a line that I use when I'm performing magic on the unit, and I've used this before. Because they'll ask me, well, how did you do that? And I would say, well, I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. And this one lady said, please. She was on suicide precautions.
Yeah.
And I use that joke, and they love it.
Yeah.
They love. I mean, people who are suicidal think it's hilarious because I'm not afraid
to talk about it.
Because it's not a problem. To have a suicidal thought. It's a problem to act on it.
That's right.
And so you're showing them that it's okay to be light and to joke about it and to be. Just be yourself with them, and they appreciate that. They're so used to people being afraid or being insecure about trying to help them. They love that lightheartedness, and I love that those stories are great. Bill's stories are great too. I just love that.
Yeah, it's really, you know, this work is so much fun. I just need to say that, you know, once we get really deeply involved in the principles and we're engaged with our clients and we love people unconditionally and we never see sick people. I never see anybody who's mentally ill. I see a lot of people with diagnoses, but that's not what I'm looking at. I'm looking at their soul, which is perfect and pure and cannot be touched. And if you tap it, it goes, hi, I'm here too, yeah, I'm with you. And I believe, you know, Dejan, when you were talking about how you had these thoughts, maybe the people, you know, your friends would object to what you had to say and everything, and you realize, oh no, I'm just going to go ahead with it. And I think the reason that they don't object to it is just what I'm talking about, because they see the health and the sincerity and the passion and the caring that you have, and that wakes up that in them. You know, they get behind it because they go, yeah, that feels really good. You know, don't ever be afraid of that, because that's so wonderful, because that's really what helps people. Because you're not talking to their insecurity, and you're not talking from your insecurity, you're talking from joy and health and enthusiasm and optimism to that part of them that wants that. It's beautiful. So,
how are we doing for time?
What's up? Oh, Peter. Oh, no.
Yeah. No, go ahead. You're first.
No, that's okay. You go.
I just love what you said about how fun this is.
Yeah.
And I just this whole conversation's been awesome. It's really great. But I just did a 4-day intensive with somebody, and she had this thing. She never talked about it the first few days. I said, you can talk about it or not. It doesn't matter. And we had so much laughter.
Yeah.
I mean, we were walking around outside and just having such a good time. And things were just coming to her. It was great. And then the last day she said, so I think I'll just tell you what the thing is, you know. I mean, why not? So she tells me, and she's got this guy who won't leave her house. She's for 2 years. They were never dating. He just came in temporarily and won't leave. So, and she's like, and I've asked him to leave. In fact, I've told him to leave. And then I come home and he's like, what are we having for dinner? And I mean, this was really troubling to her, you know. But
like, who let the dogs in?
But I just started laughing, and somehow I knew it was okay.
Yeah.
And I said, so you've been really having a hard time for a couple years. I was like, oh my God. I said, I can't remember the words, but it was something like, thought is so powerful for you that somehow it told you couldn't change your locks.
Yeah.
You know, something like that. Like, I can't remember how it came out, but it was just like, we both just started roaring.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
At how thought can look so powerful and compelling. Mm-hmm. And that was just a moment for her, you know. And I guess by the 4th day, you know, we had so much rapport and stuff. It just, you know, because normally I wouldn't laugh at somebody and say, oh, I have a problem. But it was really funny in the moment. So, yeah.
Among other things I say after the 2 words I am is, I'm a Quaker, and I just had this leading to say, I want to hold the microphone and not know what I'm going to say. And as a Quaker, I'll rise up too. No, there's just a sense of, this has been such a lovely set of days, and I've mentioned already just some of the, oh my God, I'm a wide open conduit for something from the universe coming through to some other part of the universe, and in the face of, you know, things going on in my college, in the face of, I've mentioned this in other places, you know, the young men with the very large Confederate battle flags hanging out of the back of their pickup trucks that drive through the town that I live in and park there. And I was just having a little moment of some kind of, I don't know what it is. It felt kind of like it's great. Now the description is coming. Like, it felt like a very dark purple, enormous popsicle somewhere located in the Marianas Trench in a really dark, deep water. And I was like, trying to feel it. It was like, I'm feeling still stuck and still vulnerable, and I won't be able to talk to the people who are really important to my college, and I'll just still be, you know, operating within my comfort zone, which, and I don't really believe those people at that level in my college are really healthy. I don't think they're healthy. So I just wanted to say that. And then another part of me just right now is just like, just sing about it, Peter. Okay, here we go. Right now I really believe that, and this is more like a chant, I know. I really believe that the stuckness and like the feeling like 7 years old stuff is still in power, and I won't have a breakthrough, and I'll be stuck, and that's what I think. What I've learned in the last few years is my inner judges never learn how to sing, and the inner stuck parts only know how to whisper. And I'm not trying to make this change right now. I'm not really trying to make this change right now. It's just, it's something, and it's just, it's a bus stop activity for me, you know. But I get to admit the truth and also not admit it in the normal stage voice, which would be really serious and really insightful. Like, I just wanted to, I don't know, I didn't want to, this is what was happening.
Okay.
And I get to sing about it.
All right.
There you go.
Do your thing. Your comfort zone sounds a little small.
Somebody moved in. Well, somebody moved in, and they won't move away. I keep telling them to move away.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Closing notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Should we mention that
Oh, yeah.
the idea of post webinars if people wanted them, or?
Right. We are, each of the tracks are going to offer some continuing education, actually some follow-up webinars for anyone that is interested in participating for an hour or so in the next couple of weeks, and we may repeat it 2 or to be a total of 2 or 3 times. So we're going, in one of the emails that you're going to be receiving, you'll get a time and a link and a date that we could have this. We'll try it the first time, see if any of you are at all interested and show up. But we'd like to be able to have you be able to go home, to live your life, to breathe the air, to feed the trees, and reflect on what this has meant and what comes to you, and then, you know, be able to share that with us within the next couple of weeks. So if you are interested, look for that in your email, and we'll try to connect and take that to yet another level. So we really appreciate your being here. I think the participation, the engagement from all of you has made an awesome weekend.
Yeah, yeah.
So, thank you.